A-bombs or oxymethylone? I f***ing love Anadrol, bro.
Ew! Dude! What the f***?
Oxymethylone. Is it the shit, and should you use it? Well, I want to be honest, I have a lot of controversial opinions, and I think that it's actually pretty worthwhile in terms of an off-season or an in-season. And I know I've talked a lot in the past on podcasts, on videos, on Instagram, just about anything, that it's probably not worth using orals in an off-season setting, and really at all. But I think oxandrolone has a place, and this is a big but.
My anaconda don't want none unless you got buns, hun.
Because a lot of you not use it, or should not. Maybe you can, but you should not use it.
What?
And that was vitamin C, YouTube. It was not drugs, it was vitamin C. I just put it in a keen little orange bottle. It was vitamin C, okay? I hope I don't get demonetized right away. YouTube hates me.
How dare you?
Anyways, oxymethylone, amazing compound. In a bodybuilding setting, I think it has a lot of different uses. A lot of uses that people shouldn't use it for, but a lot of different uses. It was first synthesized in 1959, and it was developed by scientists at Syntex, of course, used for mostly the androgen sensitive. Oxymethylone or androlone was used to primarily treat anemia because it had a potent effect at increasing red blood cell production, and it was definitely a limited therapeutic selection that we had to treat something like this at the time. But it also had a really cool effect of treating muscle wasting diseases. Its extremely fucking powerful anabolic effects were seen as a really good highlight of the compound. And it helped gain muscle in terms of wasting diseases. Most of the time, we could just find things that helped maintain muscle, but this thing actually helped gain muscle in a hand behind the back scenario where you were wasting muscle already. It had received FDA approval in the 1960s for use with anemia and muscle wasting diseases. Gained popularity within bodybuilding in 1970s. You see that generally this is a trend within bodybuilders that about once something becomes FDA approved or used widespread, it then becomes popular in bodybuilding about 10 years later or a decade later. This is true with GLP-1 agonists and just about really any peptide you can think of. But shortly after, and probably before bodybuilders even started using it, there was widespread recognition that oxymethylone had negative or adverse effects. Particularly, and I don't even know how this stuff wasn't sought out before being approved because its hepatotoxic effects were insane. Whenever a doctor was to prescribe oxymethylone to a patient, they had to get regular and reoccurring liver analysis done. And their primary care physician suggested highly against long-term usage, which is interesting because this compound was used in cases of HIV/AIDS in muscle wasting, and those are long-term use cases. So originally it was produced for long-term use cases. Upon further usage in human populations, it was then decided that, hey, this might not be so good to run for long-term. And as the medical industry does, it revolutionized and became better and better and better, and new drugs came out. Drugs that treated muscle wasting disease without very, very bad side effects, as well as drugs that treated anemia, or what we call erythropoiesis stimulating agents, and they did it better at a cheaper cost and in more varied populations, from kids to adults. So due to this high risk and limited demand, the FDA basically said, fucking can this thing, man, we don't need this at all, we got better products, and we don't want anybody to be a superhuman, brother.
What's up, brother? Teams, special players, some people give.
They just need to be normal people. No advanced pharmacology for them. So, as you all probably very well know, A-bombs are absorbed in an oral pathway. They are pharmaceutically orally administered. You can get injectable Anadrol, and there's a lot of IFBB pros who are very big fans of injectable Anadrol, but it may not be effective, but it's hard for me to say that. In a term of looking on paper, you basically just get nothing when you make it injectable, and part of the 17-alkylation process is what makes it effective. But then again, on paper, we can kind of just throw that shit out because in bodybuilders, they love it, and a lot of them love it. In fact, Roman Fritz is a huge fan of it and always suggests it whenever he gets the chance to meet. And I think honestly, to everyone, that's a whole moral and ethical dilemma in of itself, but it's good shit.
Oh, that's that good shit.
Of course, as any androgen does, it binds to androgen receptors and acts in nuclear reaction and non-nuclear reactions, and then it's metabolized by the liver and undergoes extensive first-pass metabolism, which is part of the reason why it's so hepatotoxic, and then eventually it's excreted, it's metabolized through the urine, and boom, you're done. Now, there's a lot of positive effects to using Anadrol, and I think there are a lot of things we can leverage as bodybuilders or just really any performance-based athlete at large. You have a rapid accrual of muscle tissue and certainly a rapid accrual of strength. You have increased red blood cell production, which seems to be extra pronounced with Anadrol compared to other compounds, and that's positive for numerous different effects when it comes to performance in endurance, especially tail ends of prep when you're really, really glycogen depleted and you need to do cardio, you need to do a 2-hour training session. I mean, this stuff has a big use there. But it can also short-term increase appetite and long-term decrease it. So again, you have this added benefit to where you probably actually want to decrease appetite closer to the end of a prep or a caloric deficit, or if you're a fighter during the period of time where you're trying to cut weight aggressively, or if you're a strength athlete, the same thing is true. But when you initialize it and the deployment process has just started, it can increase appetite, which again is kind of favorable because usually when you're eating more food, it's harder to eat that food. And especially if we're looking at the periodization of a prep, you start eating more food, you end eating less food. It could be beneficial. But obviously we're looking at huge issues. We're looking at hepatotoxicity because of its first pass to the liver. Also, numerous studies have inundated the fact that it could potentially cause liver tumors, as well as liver cirrhosis, which is not good. That's scarring or hepatocirrhosis, not good stuff. It does cause alterations in lipid profiles, but what androgen doesn't, and is that even relevant, is the real question that I really think everyone should look into. Stop talking about fucking HDL and LDL, okay? HDLC and LDLC do not exist. Those are calculations. Those aren't actual markers.
Fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's never landed. It is no matter. It's not on the elemental chart. It's not fucking real, right? All right?
Every person ever talks about them as actual markers. They are calculations. Get your lipoproteins tested. Your lipoprotein B, your lipoprotein A100, your lipoprotein a. Get those guys tested. Do a lipid differentiation test. Don't do LDLC, HDLC. They're irrelevant.
Guys that are irrelevant now, but hey, irrelevant.
So does it actually cause cardiovascular issues in terms of alteration of lipid profiles? Probably. I've seen it definitely alter apolipoprotein Bs, which is atherogenic in and of itself, but long-term usage, I have yet to see that actually being causal to potential cardiovascular disease risks. There is some things like extra water retention, which could cause increased blood pressure, which could cause erythropoiesis, which could cause a lot of host of other issues. But for the most part, yeah, it's probably going to cause some cardiovascular disease risk, I'll be honest. Of course, it has an androgenic effect, right? You have the effect of losing hair, you have the effect of virilization in women, even though it's touted to maybe not have that effect, it certainly does. And it's been a cornerstone in bodybuilding for decades now. Since the 1970s, it's been widely used among most bodybuilders in the upper and lower levels of bodybuilding. But as of recently, I'd say the last half a decade, it's gotten the reputation of being something that people shouldn't use because of its hepatotoxic effects and the wide variety of other compounds that you could leverage as opposed to Anadrol. I was thinking about oxymetholone. That is also what we're talking about, but we call it Anadrol in bodybuilding, folks. And that's good. I think hepatotoxicity generally isn't a good thing, but with all things that we use as bodybuilders and generally as humans, smoking, drugs, I mean, we prescribe, which is the craziest thing to me, meth to children.
Wanna cook?
And we're here talking about potential hepatotoxic negative consequences of certain drugs. I mean, it blows my mind, right? Widespread, like the same bodybuilders who will talk about hepatotoxicity being a very bad thing will abuse methamphetamines or give their children methamphetamines.
You're goddamn right.
Whatever, right? Everyone has their own thing, I guess, their vices, whatever. Is it going to be that bad? Can you use it as a bodybuilder? Is there places and times in which it can be really beneficial? Yes. I do want to preface with a couple different things, and there's many different metabolites of Anadrol. Real talk, I think it's very useful, but I always want to preface with things that you should know before using something like Anadrol, and this is my personal review as well as objective data, and I think you should really be keen to know what it is. And yes, I'm going to look at my notes because these words are wildly complex in naming of compounds that I cannot just spit out like Vigorous Steve can. I also don't use nootropics like that man does, but here we go. We're looking at two primary metabolites which have potential negative consequences in the human body. We're looking at 3-alpha hydroxy, 17-alpha methyl 5-alpha androsten 17-1, which is one of the primary metabolites formed through the reduction processes through the liver of Anadrol. This metabolite actually retains some of its metabolic activity and anabolic activity and could be seen as one of the predictive causal cases to why Anadrol, even though it's a non-estrogenic compound, can cause estrogenic side effects. Then there's also 3-beta hydroxy 7-alpha methyl 5-alpha androsten 17-1A, which is another significant metabolite, but seems to have less of an effect. I don't even know if this is actually metabolite. I'll be honest. This research is speculative at best. I don't even want to comment on it to be fully clear. I don't think it might even be effective in this case. I don't know.
I do not want to comment.
This is where research, in vitro, in vivo, all this stuff gets really convoluted. You don't really need to know this stuff. I think knowing mostly what we do know, which is 3-alpha hydroxy 17-alpha methyl 5-alpha androsten 17-1 compared to 3-beta hydroxy 17-alpha methyl 5-alpha androsten 17-1. The 3-alpha is more important. It's relevant. So like I was talking about, there is some estrogenic effects. I think it could be proposed by this 3-alpha hydroxy metabolite, but unlike in other anabolic steroids, again, Anadrol or oxymethylone doesn't have estrogenic effects, or at least on paper it doesn't, because it doesn't aromatize into any form of estrogen. However, it does still seem to cause estrogenic effects, through which we virtually have no exact mechanism clearly defined. I know a lot of people say that they think they know the answers, or that they have found research that supports the answers, but they are lying.
I think I know the answer, Mr. Garrison. Shut up, fat boy! Hey, don't call me fat, you Jew!
There is absolutely no data to suggest how this is actually happening. What is understood is that there could be some mechanism of action from the 3-alpha hydroxyl 17-alpha methyl 5-alpha androsten 17-1 metabolite, but still very unclear research at best. It does seem, and through personal anecdote, not research, being very clear here, that Anadrol somehow can influence prolactin. It does increase it in lab tests that I've done with my clients, and because I have such a large group of people to sort of see data from, I can come to the conclusion and easily say that somehow Anadrol is increasing prolactin. If you were to ask me how, I don't know. The research isn't very clear. I don't see anything in the research talking about this, but it does seem that when you, as an independent variable, put Anadrol into the mix, some people do experience elevated prolactin, and enough for me to say that it is statistically significant and not insignificant. And I think that maybe what might be happening here is the estrogenic-like effects that you're experiencing from Anadrol, or some people do, is initiated by this prolactin increase, which on paper, again, isn't really clarified as to how this happens, why it happens, or if it even happens at all.
I don't understand. I don't understand, Paige. I don't understand.
But on my paper, the ones that I create, the research and clientele, it seems to fucking happen. And there definitely also notably is drug-on-drug interactions, which could be causal to this whole estrogenic effect as well. And I'm sorry I'm really on an off tangent here at this point, but it is important to know that if using Anadrol as a bodybuilder, there can be estrogenic effects like gynecomastia. Even though on paper that shouldn't be happening, it's obviously fucking happening. It also can affect certain compounds that are now more widespread used in bodybuilders, which are ACE inhibitors, ARBs, anything that's dealing with necessarily that angiotensin or RAS system at large, as well as beta blockers. There's definitely interactions there. It could potentially, through its CYP inhibition, actually increase the efficacy of certain beta blockers, decrease the efficacy of certain ACE inhibitors. So you just want to be careful and aware of those kind of things. But at large, in application, how could this stuff be used? As a coach who's helped, at this point, hundreds of people, as well as talking to other coaches in the upper echelons of bodybuilding. And not that this is any kind of touting my own horn, man. Like, I want you guys to know at the end of the day what's going on behind the scenes of high-level coaches. I'm not going to use any names, as I never do, because I think that that's inappropriate, and if those people wish to disclose what they're doing, they can. That's not my business. What I do see most frequently used is Anadrol in pairing with Trenbolone. This is common amongst almost all bodybuilding coaches at the higher levels, and they always quote this effect, this extraordinary effect when pairing Anadrol and Trenbolone together. This effect that is sort of unlike anything else. There's this synergy. I don't know what that could be. I think that there's definitely some interactions with the metabolites there, but I also think that it's more mediated by thyroid alterations, and there's this like super glycogen sort of compensation you get when using Anadrol. And when pairing that with Trenbolone, there's this like really unique effect where people start to develop full muscles like they've never experienced before, even in the absence of a lot of carbohydrates. This could be nitrogen retention at large, but it does seem that there's a little bit more going on, because nitrogen retention doesn't put, millimeters on people's arms, for instance, in just a matter of a couple of days. And where would you pair these two together? Well, really good question, guys. I think that you are likely going to pair Anadrol in with a cycle in the sort of later phases of a prep, when you're not starving, but food is definitely coming down. You're still eating healthy though, but you might be implementing a little bit of Trenbolone, something like 50 to 75 milligrams per week as you escalate along the timeline of a prep, which all things do if periodization is correctly performed. Trenbolone will increase, as will Anadrol remain a constant, somewhere around 10, 12 weeks potentially for some people. Doses can vary anywhere from 50 to 100 milligrams during this time, even going much higher, but that's not going to be disclosed to you guys. I think most people, personally, are going to get an effect that is noteworthy and significant at 50 to 100 milligrams. I would not run 100 milligrams for a prolonged period of time, but I think it's effective at some point in time, and not necessarily longer than 6 weeks, but not shorter than 4 weeks. And then I would say the best next case is when rebounding from either a mini cut in an off season or a post-show rebound. So we run into a dilemma here, because during the pre-show, you've likely used Anadrol. Post-show, would you keep using Anadrol? Well, as all things do, look, you say yes to one thing, you say no to something else. When you say yes to taking anabolic steroids, you say no to a lot of health. When you say yes to taking Anadrol for a prolonged period of time, you're saying no to a good liver. And that's just part of it. Bodybuilders take risks, guys.
All in.
Cold.
And this conversation isn't for someone who's 200 pounds, in a regional level show trying to get first place for his first show ever. This is the guy who's at nationals competing over and over again, trying to get the pro card. This is the guy who's 250 pounds, 5'10", lean. And this is the guy who is in the IFBB pro rank right now. I will add a very important caveat here. The effects of Anadrol don't need to be used your entire career. You don't need to leverage that for your entire career. You can use it for what I see most people using, is getting that transition from regional level competitor to a national level competitor, really aiming for his pro card. Once you get there, once you have your pro card, once you're being recognized at nationals, once you've developed the physique that most people would consider competitively a professional bodybuilder, you are really in much less need of using extreme formulations of cycle. You can basically maintain what you have with a lot less, and you don't need to use such drastic swings in formulations. But I believe personally that using this at the sort of adept part of your career where you've competed several times, you're looking at a national level stage, and you're looking at even placing at that national level stage and competing for your pro card, Anadrol in conjunction with Trenbolone is very useful, pre-show or post-show. And that does mean you're going to have to accept the risk of prolonged use, which is a very real effect when we're talking about hepatic function. But, and this is a very big but, if you're doing objective data collection and you're getting blood work done every 4 to 10 weeks, realistically, and guys, you can do this for cheap. Go to Rise HRT. You can get this done for very, very cheap. But if you're getting the objective work and you're still seeing basically a maintenance of hepatic function, GGT is looking good, ALT, AST is good, go to the video that me and Kurt published, Kurt Havens, on his channel. We did a whole video on how to read lab work. It's a very good video. We did 2 of them, actually. There's a part 2. They're each a little over an hour long. If you're looking at how to interpret those labs, you can go there and watch that video. But you're going to want to test the ALT, GGT, a couple other indications of general health too, like inflammation and C-reactive protein, homocysteine, those kind of things. But if those things are good and you're not trending in a negative direction and you're staying within that 50 to 100 milligram range, you can leverage Anadrol pre-show for 5 to 6 weeks, maybe upping it to 10 depending on what level you're at, and then post-show for 4 to 6 weeks, maybe upping it to 10 depending on what level you're at. It will have a dramatic effect on your physique. Now, I don't recommend you run Anadrol for a total of 20 weeks. I think probably the sweet spot is around 10 weeks at most, so we're looking at maybe 3 months, but most people would probably benefit for about 8 weeks. 4 weeks pre-show, 4 weeks post-show. That will get you unreal and indescribable effects. If you're pairing that with a good cycle, really good nutrition, and you truly are skin fucking lean, like you could put a blade onto your bicep and it would pop kind of lean, it has its place. Anadrol is useful, but you have to understand that it has drug altercations. You will alter ARB use. You will alter ACE inhibitor and beta blockers in use. You will create a highly hepatotoxic environment. You can potentially stimulate estrogenic side effects like gynecomastia. It could potentially increase prolactin and cause prolactinemia in you, and that can be negative in terms of sexual function as well as general health. And again, gynecomastia, who wants that shit?
Mama!
And then there's untestable variables as well. We have the 3-alpha hydroxy, 7-alpha methyl, 5-alpha androsten, 17-1 metabolite, which can be a problem, which we cannot test. We cannot see if you're a high converter to this metabolite. We cannot see if this metabolite is in you taking a very potent intracellular effect. So we're shooting from the hip. That's what you got. At the end of the day, I could give you all the research and mechanism, but you're shooting from the fucking hip. Does Anadrol have a place in bodybuilding? Yes. It works really, really well. I don't care how many safer use educators out there tell you never to use it or to very, very infrequently use it. I think it has a wildly good place. And if you really want my opinion, you can use it in the off season too, well with effect, but you need some guidance. You can't just do this shit willy-nilly and expect to get some crazy results. There's a lot caveat here, but I think the best place that most people could leverage it is pre and post show. So what do you guys think? Is it useful? Are you going to pop some A-bombs like I did at the beginning? Sorry, vitamin C like I did at the beginning of the video. YouTube, it was not any sort of pharmaceutical drug. You tell me. I'm going to go get a workout in and leverage my results for the best. Sorry, this was a bit of a longer one, but let me know what you think. Subscribe, like, and comment. Please tell me what you think. I like to get feedback because it creates a bigger data pool for me.